Welcome, friends and fans, to The Artist's Voice. This is Jerry Hardesty, the host and producer of the show. I launched a podcast back in 2018 to empower artists to tell their stories and talk about their art. All genres are welcome, as well as all international guest artists. Now, you may listen to the show on most podcast platforms. The video will also be available on Facebook and or YouTube following the interview. You may also listen to all episodes on the show's website, which is, as you can see, scrolling at the bottom of the page, www.theartistsvoice.info. And you may view a headshot of each artist and samples of their work on that website as well. Now, today, my guest for this episode is JM Rizzi, an artist originally from Brooklyn, New York, and now residing and working in Dallas, Texas. Welcome, JM, to the show.
Hey, Jerry. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for over a week now.
Same here.
Anyway, and having fun looking at your website and just learning more about you so that we can have a great conversation here. Hey, JM, what's one good thing that's happened to you in the past week?
Oh, in the past week. Are we talking art related, life related?
Either.
Well, keeping it in the art realm, I did make a breakthrough. I've been focusing in a new process of masking and stenciling. And so last week, after multiple attempts and failures, I did have a breakthrough. And I think, well, as you know, as an artist, sometimes we have breakthroughs and then we think we're going to sit down and recreate it. And then that's where the struggle comes in. But as far as positive, that was certainly a positive in the art area.
Well, that's fantastic. We'll have to talk more about that when we talk about process. But first, like I said, I've spent quite a bit of time reviewing your work, and I just love the saturated colors. So what I want to do first is I want to share one of your images, one of your paintings that I really like. Of course, I like them all, but this is one that I really like. So I'm going to share the screen. And we're going to go to this painting.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember how large this one is, JM?
I do. That one, it's actually here in the studio behind me in the corner. That one is approximately about 52 inches tall by 80 inches wide. And this painting, staying in the topic of breakthroughs, this one in particular, it's got acid-free tissue paper over the top of it that gets these saturated colors. So what I've done here is I've collaged over the black and white line work, or the black line work. And for a while, I had been using this collage technique to create backgrounds and then painting a composition over the top of these, multi-layered backgrounds. And then, one day, probably out of, the need to kind of break the routine of the process, I started to use the collage as a foreground, and then the line work became, in this particular case, a bit of a midground. So you could see there's some things going on deeper behind the line work. The black line comes in, and then these collaged shapes kind of float over the top of it. And one of the things that led me to this was the inspiration that I find from walls, mostly in urban cities, pretty much anywhere where people will, the walls become these kind of organic living facades. And what I mean by that is, there could be a color. Somebody decides they want to write their name or draw something on the wall, and then maybe an advertisement is pasted over the top of it. And over time, things start to kind of erode,
Yes.
and it becomes these, we see them all the time. They become these kind of little beautiful, um, picturesque moments. And so in that vein, this process was born. And as opposed to, it's quite common, people certainly like to emulate that, where they'll actually remove things from the environment and bring it into the studio. The idea here was to kind of create that language, but in a more abstract way, so that it's connected to um, the sort of quote unquote natural process, but it's filtered through my own sensibility and the materials around me.
Sure, sure. Well, it's got all of the elements that I really like. It's got drips and vibrant colors and lines and uh, man, I really love the composition and the piece. And I know what you're saying about pasting signs over advertisement signs and that kind of thing. I pick up on those as well. Oh, here's another one. Oh, that one didn't come up. Never mind. Anyway, I really like that. Now, tell me, did your style come from your formative years while riding a skateboard with a spray can in your hand in Brooklyn, New York?
It was certainly, it certainly still influences me today. It was a very, that was, I think for most of us, our teenage years are very formative. And I was fortunate enough to be able to, one, be drawn to certain things like skateboarding, music, graffiti, things at the time that were a bit more fringe societies. Now it's mainstream and it's popular culture. But those things, when I say in those times, for me, it was late 80s, early 90s. They were still very much uh, fringe kind of subcultures. And so something within me, don't know why, but I was just drawn to those things. And I think some of it has to do with um, music, listening to music, drawing, skateboarding, or things that you could do where you didn't necessarily need other people. If you had
Sure,
a skateboard, you
sure.
can go outside and ride it and learn tricks. If you're drawing and painting, you can sit in your room and listen to music, and all that kind of came together. But then, once you did start to find people who were kind of that mindset, then it was about almost finding a tribe of people that
Yeah,
that you connected with. And back then, pre-internet, now it's a lot easier to find things. But pre-internet, if you found people, there was just a bit of respect. Like, if you're at a particular place, the fact that you took the initiative to find that place, whether it was an abandoned building where people were painting murals, or if it was someplace in Manhattan where people were skateboarding, if you found it, that was kind of the rite of passage.
right, right. Well, I guess I was born too early because I missed that generation obviously because I'm like a parent of that generation. But and I grew up on a farm, hated every minute of it. But I was a loner too, but I didn't have a skateboard or there wasn't any place to skateboard that would do those kinds of things. Well, the about
Or a
information.
train to get on, and
I'm sorry.
a subway and a train, or a subway to get on and go find people.
Yeah, yeah, you could do that. I could. The about information on your website states that your visual language is shifting to convey your own inner story that transcends words. So, can you share
Mhm.
that story, or have you already shared, obviously, part of it there about your childhood and growing up with graffiti and skateboarding and so forth, and music. So my question is, can you share more about that story, or is
Yeah, absolutely. So much of my to take it back to what we were just talking about, there was for me in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a graffiti movement that came up above ground, it's called, because before that it was mostly done in subways and subway tunnels. And there's until this day, there's something about a person writing their name that when done with a particular style really appeals to me. But while studying at the School of Visual Arts in New York and becoming aware of abstract painters like Robert Motherwell, like Franz Klein, like de Kooning, I felt that there was a connection in the movements and even Dubuffet. And where I felt the connection for me was this hand style of writing words, connecting to the abstract painters that I was now being influenced by. And then how can I take that style and translate it or evolve it into pure abstraction and sometimes representational too. I think there is something about, abstraction comes from representational, but then making that full circle and coming back through abstraction and back into creating representational work. So I guess long story short, when I say my own language, it's taking those influences and filtering them through myself with that hand style, that writing style, but creating something that often looks like lettering, but is really more of, or I would say less narrative. So where I'm not necessarily writing words or telling a story, I'm allowing the viewer to come up with those connections on their own.
Well, I didn't pick up on the handwriting in your work, and maybe I missed something. Is it still there?
Yeah, in some pieces it's still there. A lot of times what I'll often do too, and this is something that I didn't realize that some painters in the 40s and 50s were doing, particularly Klein, where I will do a large scale drawing and then find compositions within that and then scale them up to large scale. Like you can see the paintings behind me, the black and white over my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And what those are compositions of a much larger drawing. And in that sense, I'm taking the viewer and I'm pulling them into the drawing or into the composition by enlarging them.
Okay. Now let me show another one of your paintings, a black and white painting, and I do love the black and white as well. Let's see. Oops. I'm getting there.
It's okay.
This one.
Oh, yes.
I think I saw you. Didn't you paint this one on the floor?
This one was painted partially on the floor and then partially on the wall. That's how those drips came about. But this aligns exactly with what we were just talking about, because in here, you can certainly see some letter forms in this composition, and it has a bit of a writing style to it.
Yes.
But also feels it's got the drips in it. So this kind of is exactly in line of what we were just talking about.
Yeah, no, weren't you crawling around on the floor on the edge of this canvas? I know it's very large, 72 inches by 108 inches. Weren't you?
Yes.
And you were painting from the very edge.
Yes.
So you weren't
Yes.
you weren't on top of the canvas at all. Am I right?
No, that's the trick, because if I did that, then I'd get my hands in it, I'd get my feet in it, and and then it would just turn into a big mess.
Well, some artists do that. Is they get right in the midst of all that paint.
Absolutely, yeah.
So anyway, well, anyway, I like that painting. I had to show it because I do like black and white, and I personally think that black and white is very difficult to communicate, a good message across. You can do some
Yeah,
black and white, and it'll just be crap.
I think you're right, but I think when it works, it's there's something about the boldness of it that just works. And for me, because I've spent so much time creating black and white imagery, that sometimes for me it's that place. It's kind of like a safe harbor that I can return to
Mhm.
when color might be eluding me at the time, or if there's any bit of disillusionment in the work that I'm making,
Mhm.
I can go back and make a series of black and white pieces. It's kind of like a palette cleanser for me.
Yeah. Now, did you ever take a picture of your color, uh, your color pictures, and um, change it to black and white to see the uh,
Oh
value
yeah,
value relationships?
absolutely, yeah. That another old trick is holding up a mirror for the
Yes.
composition.
Yes.
And sometimes we get it's almost like I don't know if you play chess at all, I don't. I'm not going to say that I'm very good at it, but I do enjoy it. It's almost like we can get so caught up. We see a particular thing in our mind, and doing things like changing it to black and white or putting a mirror up to it gives you that different perspective.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I totally lost you. I don't know what happened, but
I don't know. I
something.
thought it was me. I was just about to refresh and you came back in. So,
No, no, it was definitely my screen. So if it happens again, you'll know that
okay,
it's
just
happening
hang
on
tight.
my. But I forget what I was going to ask you now because that really interrupted my train of thought here, the flow. I think that anyway, back on black and whites. I think it's the strength of the simplicity that really communicates the piece and makes the piece. What do I want to say? Makes it effective.
Impactful. Yeah, I agree. And also, color is something that is very personal to people in particular.
Hmm.
And I think black and white kind of transcends that.
Yes, yes, it does. So, well, if you had unlimited resources and time, what would you do with your art?
Unlimited resource and time. That's a great question. I guess that's one of those questions that come about every time the Mega Millions is really high up and everybody for a week imagines that they have won and they say, "What would you do with your time?"
Yeah, unrealistic, perhaps.
Oh, but for it's nice to dream. I
Sure.
think if I had unlimited, I know exactly what I would do because I've thought about it. I would purchase some land. Um, Not exactly sure where that would be, but what I would like to do is would resurrect, or I would erect a big wall, let's say, out in the middle of a field. And I would have different lifts so that I could paint murals on this wall, this beautiful picturesque wall scene. And I would just document it. And I would paint the murals, then paint it out. And that would be sort of the life's work of the documenting of these really large scale, let's say it's 30 feet high by 60 feet wide. And it's just sitting out there, not visually disrupted by anything around it. And that would be my canvas to sit out and paint on.
Well, you've already done some of that, doing some murals all over the world. So, which I find very fascinating. Which brings me to my next question. I think you're very versatile and very quite prolific. And in addition to your colorful abstracts, you also create murals, sculptures, black and whites, and collaborations. So, which of these art forms do you find most challenging, and which do you prefer?
I think most challenging is the large scale murals, particularly if there is a lot of height involved.
Mm-hmm.
Once I get past 40 feet, I get a little bit shaky. And then past 60 feet, you kind of relax. There's like that breaking through. But those are by far the most challenging to execute, but to me are the most rewarding and the most visually satisfying.
Well, and when you go up to those heights, you're in a cherry picker, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah, and those things tend to have a bit of movement on them. The
yes,
further you're extended.
yes, of course. Well, that brings me to the process of your murals and how you create them. I saw, and I'm getting ahead of myself actually, that saw you do some sketching in a sketchbook on one of
Mm-hmm.
your images. And then in another image, I saw that you were drawing on a wall with a quite long stick. Now,
Yeah.
and you had some kind of a pencil or whatever at the end of that stick. Does it have a formal name, or is that something that you created yourself?
That's something that I saw. There's a famous image of Matisse
Yes.
laying in bed, and he has this long stick, and he's drawing on the wall. And I know the image that you're talking about. I wanted to try that idea, and with that particular piece, I didn't have any preconceived idea. I just wanted to. I wanted to project the idea of motion, and there's only so far your own arm can reach. And this was a wall that was probably maybe 18 feet high.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a painter's pole and taped a large sidewalk chalk
Ah.
that kids use,
Uh-huh.
taped it on the end of that, and then I was able to make big sweeping marks on the wall.
Yeah, I found it very fascinating. So, do you normally, when you do a mural, do you normally draw on the wall prior to applying the paint?
Yeah, but usually with that was an interesting project because it was a lot more of a free form experience. Usually when I'm painting a mural, I have a design already in mind, and I use a grid technique on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So the designs that I create will be created in a template that is exactly to scale to the wall that I'm working on. So then I create a grid. Let's just say, for example, we'll use that same example of a 40 feet by 60 feet. I'll create a template that's maybe 40 inches by 60 inches. And then that grid will be a 4-inch by 4-inch grid, which when I'm on the wall is 4 foot by 4 foot. And then that allows me to lay the entire piece out, because if you're up very high, You certainly can't stand back.
Right.
So that's a way to kind of anchor the composition.
Well, again, that's very fascinating how you create that. Now, do you ever do? I assume that with these grids and these designs, you have to get permission from whomever hired you to do it before you actually do it. Is that correct?
Yes, for the most part. Nowadays, I try to get permission, particularly for the large ones. It's kind of hard to be out there on a lift without anybody noticing.
Yeah, yeah. Have you seen the big mural in the trade center that Jose? I forget.
Jose Parla.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
fascinated with his work. Have you seen it?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, he's an amazing artist. Yeah,
I mean, have you seen it in person?
I have. Yeah,
Dang. I'm
he did.
Go ahead.
He's got one in Austin as well. It's not I don't
Yeah,
know if it's as large, but he's got a pretty big one in Austin that I drove down to check out as well.
it's red and white, isn't it?
I'm trying to remember. I think it's got some earth tones to it as well. Yeah.
Does it? Well, anyway, I went into the World Trade Center when we were last in New York, and I wanted to see it, and they wouldn't let me see it. So
What did they tell you? It was closed?
it was in security. It was in the secure area, and they wouldn't let me go.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking, okay, you've got this big mural that costs what, $1 million or whatever, and you won't let the public see it. That's not right.
I agree, 100%. Well, I will say though, that is one of the great things about New York is that so many buildings have so much wonderful art in their lobbies
Hmm.
that if you're polite enough to the security, they'll they'll give you a couple of minutes to soak it in.
Mm. Well, this I don't know what the deal was, but anyway, they wouldn't let me see it. So I was
Yeah, that the security around the Freedom Tower is pretty intense.
sure, sure, and I understand. I understand,
Yeah,
even though I didn't like it.
right. Yeah, you can understand and
Oh,
still not like it, right?
that, that's right.
Actually, you can understand and disagree.
There you go. Doesn't do you any good to disagree, though. So, well, explain how you're pursuing your career and going after opportunities despite the hardships that most artists endure.
Good question. So what is I guess, what is well, I'll tell you what, since things have been kind of starting to open up,
Mhm.
a lot of opportunities are coming back my way. So during this last year, I spent a lot of time just kind of refining the work and and being comfortable with the reality that things have come to a screeching halt as far as creative opportunities, and it allowed me to kind of go back to some older processes before there were any opportunities when I just made work for myself and kind of pick up on some of the processes that I was working with and evolve them a little further, knowing that once we got our arms around COVID and people became vaccinated and things started to open up, that there would be a hunger for people to, one, want to get out, and two, want to experience art. So I guess in a way, I've just kind of, in a way that, you know, I don't want to use the word training because that seems a little um, too contained, but I guess just, you know, getting back to the process of making work and putting it out there. Social media is a great way to get your work out there when there's no big projects happening. And now things are starting to open up, and emails are starting to come in, and opportunities are starting to come back.
So, are you presently represented by a gallery?
I am currently not. No, I work with several galleries
Mhm.
in New York, Dallas, California. I work with an agency in China to do some large scale installations over there, but nothing exclusive.
Well, okay, yeah, never mind. I started to say something. Well, that being said, how do you approach a blank canvas? What's your process for approaching a blank canvas?
That's a good question. Well, I think usually when I'm approaching a blank canvas, I already have an idea of what it is that I want to make. And sometimes my goal is to create an exact piece that I know in my mind. I have the composition drawn out. I know what color I'm going to use, and it's just simply a matter of executing. And then there's other times where I'll have material that I want to work with,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a loose concept of a composition, but no real end result in mind. And part of the reason why I do that is because I like the discoveries. I like to explore things and have those kind of eureka moments. I mean, I think that's what most of us as artists are trying to get to when
Mm-hmm.
we create something that we hadn't planned, either one we hadn't plans to make, or turned out far better or exceeded whatever we had hoped it would be. So those are kind of the two processes that I have, or the two ways of approaching a canvas. One is it's going to be this, and I'm going to just be kind of the laborer of this idea that I have, or this composition and color pattern that I want to use. And then there's that other time where it's more of the kind of mad scientist in the lab, where it's let's see what happens when this combines with this.
Well, okay, if you sketch out a composition that you want to paint, how detailed is it? I mean, for an abstract painting, I would think it would be difficult to create those sketches.
Well, it can be, but the process that I have at this point, and like I said, you know, I can take a drawing and find a composition within that. Then it's just a matter of drawing what you see. So that isn't too difficult to do, particularly when I'm using just flat colors.
Mhm, mhm.
When there's more texture involved, that's when the experimentation part becomes a big part of the process.
And for texture, other than paint, do you use other material for texture?
Yep, I use collage. I use paper.
Mhm.
Um, that's been probably the most, I guess, for me, has produced the most fruit for me in my work. I'm drawn to the transparencies, because a lot of the work that I do, like some of the black and white work, and some of the work that I've done previously, is very much hard edged, flat color. So the introduction of the paper and that texture allows for, I guess, more of an organic feel.
Now, when you say flat color, are you meaning opaque?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. But and your uh, collage elements or your paper collages,
Mhm.
you're not taking it to the extreme such as Mark Bradford does.
No, no, no. Well, that's a good point. Yeah, he kind of uses his paper is his paint.
Yes,
So
good point.
he'll create multiple layers of paint and then start to peel away, and reveal some of the colors underneath and some of the textures underneath, which I
Now,
find fascinating as well.
I found fascinating about his work is that he takes water, a hose, and sprays it down.
Yeah,
Do you know why he does that?
I think he does that to soak it so that the paper becomes more liquefied. I think it probably makes it easier to adhere to a surface,
Ah, okay.
because if you try to adhere, um, especially some of that thicker paper,
Mhm.
trying to adhere that to a surface, it's very difficult to get that flat. You get lots of bubbles and creases. And this is me. I mean, I'm guessing.
Sure.
The reason to do that is when you wet it, it causes the paper to expand like fabric. You know, if you get a crease in your clothes, your jacket, you can wet it. The fabric expands, and then once it dries, it contracts to a flat surface.
Well, it's a very interesting process. What for whatever reason he does it. So, what is your favorite part of painting, of your process?
My favorite part of painting is probably that part. You know, it's kind of like starting the day off. It's like, you know, loosening up the muscles,
Hmm.
loosening up the brain, clearing out your mind of all of the noise that's going on, and then finding myself when I'm just in it, and I'm not thinking about X, Y, and Z. I'm not thinking about the fact that today our taxes are due. I am just I am just in the moment. It's very meditative, and I'm and that's it.
So you
That's
get.
my favorite part. Because I could say my favorite part is when I'm finished and and I'm happy with the results.
Mhm.
But that's that's sometimes an elusive experience. But I think in that moment when there isn't a concern about what the final product will look like, it's just the process, and I'm loosened up. And whether it be painting, whether it be cutting a large scale stencil, whether it be applying collage to the surface, it's just flowing. That flow state is what I enjoy.
You get in that zone, and the world doesn't exist.
Yes. And that ultimately, I think, is at least why we start doing it. That's why we
Yeah.
started making art, is that, you know, for me, there's a lot of escapism involved in making art. As there was when I was younger with, you know, skateboarding and
Uh-huh.
graffiti and things like that. It's a form of escapism, and a very pure one.
It's very therapeutic. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What's your least favorite part of the process?
I guess the least favorite part is when those things aren't clicking,
Ah,
uh, and I'm putting too much pressure on the process to
and
make something.
does that happen often?
I don't want to say it happens often, but you know, sometimes there is a pressure when you're in the studio to make something, to have something done.
Hmm.
And when multiple days go by and I don't feel like I'm being productive, and then I start to force it, and then it's in that phase is my least favorite.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, you have some favorite artists from the abstract expressionist period. Do you still study those artists and take things from them that you can use in your own work?
Sometimes I'll go back to I just started rereading the writings of Robert Motherwell, um, and yeah, to me those are kind of the masters for my work. Um, and I do still find a lot of value in their work. Yes.
Hmm. I noted that you one of your favorites is Cy Twombly. Have
Mm.
have you read the biography Chalk?
I purchased the biography of Chalk,
Okay. The
called Chalk, and it's sitting on my bookshelf, waiting for the right moment.
the author lives here in Salt Lake City, and I interviewed him when Chalk first came out, and so he's on one of the episodes of the podcast.
Oh, I'll have to go back and listen to it.
Yeah, I around 20 or 21 or somewhere along there. I can't remember exactly, but it was one of the earlier ones.
Yeah, he's certainly an artist that fascinates me,
Uh-huh.
and his work is becoming more and more relevant.
Let me see. You again back to collage. You use an awful lot of collage elements in your work, and do you do you believe that your work could stand alone without those collage elements?
I think so. I think that I don't use collage in all of my work and all of my pieces. So I think certainly that it can. I think there are different avenues of expression that I go to depending on what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So collage is just one element. Just like I'll use spray paint in some pieces, and some pieces I won't. Some pieces will just be, black paint on a white surface or white paint on a black surface. It really depends. It's about feeling a sense of balance within the body of work that I'm creating. So what I mean by that is like sometimes, I'll be working, if it's collage, where you kind of come to an end point where you need to put it down, so that you can allow space for new ideas to take root.
Do you create your own collage pieces? I
I
mean,
do,
I'm saying,
like just solely collage.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I have. I've created some. It's interesting because I'm such a student of the line that it is hard for me to accept that a piece is finished if it
Mm-hmm,
doesn't have some element of either line work or of my own hand.
mm-hmm.
Now, understanding that each piece of the composition is laid down by my hand, it's almost like that signature needs to be there to make it feel complete.
So, do you ever put in a collage piece, paper, whatever, and you think you've got it in there? This isn't working. What do you
Oh
do?
yeah,
Do you scrape it out, paint over it?
scrape it out, scrape it out. Yeah, I've learned that if it's the end of the day
Hmm.
and I'm uncertain about a piece, I'll just tape it on there and come back, because if I collage it on in a rush and then I leave the studio, if I come back, I can't take it off.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and there, and I think many of us have had those experiences where we should have stopped and we didn't.
Hmm. Hmm.
And those are lessons that are sometimes hard learned lessons.
So, do
We
you
realize that the painting was finished, but there's something in us that I don't know what that
keep
word is, but it's
pushing it? Yeah. So,
yes.
how about a sander? Do you ever sand your paintings?
I have not, but I have been thinking about working with pressure washer
Okay.
and seeing what kind of effect that would make on a collaged piece. And that's more of the kind of experimental mad scientist part of the practice.
Yeah, I've seen some guys take their paintings to a shower
Oh
and
yeah,
give them a nice shower.
I give them a good wash.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you liken your work's hues to musical notes. Bright
Hmm.
colors for horn pops and muted tones form bass lines. How did you come up with these analogies, and do you have other descriptive analogies?
Well, music is very important to me,
Mhm,
and whenever I'm in the studio working, I'm usually listening to music. Lately, there have been some audiobooks that have been mixed in, but the a lot of the paintings that I create, they have this kind of compositional fluidness to them,
mhm.
and when I'm thinking about adding color to it, I'm thinking about the motion of the piece and where the colors are going to hit. Um, I'm a big fan of jazz, so that kind of analogy just made sense to me.
Mhm.
Where you've got the background or certain hues kind of fill the space and allow the accent notes to become clear. Whereas if you didn't have that, whether it's a bass line or some other form of just mood that's created in the composition, those horn pops or those accent marks wouldn't stand out as much as they do. So it's kind of a blending and creating that balance.
Are you a musician yourself?
I am not, no. Although in my mind, I imagine that one day I will pick up an instrument. I played the drums when I was a kid, and I took guitar lessons as a kid, and I even played the electric bass as a kid. But art is one of those things for me that took all of my attention. I love music. A lot of my friends are musicians, and growing up, a lot of my friends were in bands. But I guess, there comes a point when you decide, okay, what do I want to devote my time and attention to? And art and painting just seems this endless void that demands everything.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, I agree totally. How do you handle critics or criticism and or rejection?
I think over time you just start to put the criticism is, as soon as you show your artwork, somebody's going to have something negative to say about it.
Mhm.
And for me, that used to bother me quite a bit. And then I had to think about why was that opinion affecting me or holding more sort of mental space than the positive criticism
Mhm.
or the positive critiques. It's like 20 people, 10 people can tell you that they love your painting, or they see, they have positive things to say about it. And then there's that one person that says something negative, and in our minds we go, that's the right answer. That negative one. It kind of because it speaks to our insecurities, it speaks to our self-doubt. And I think it takes a great courage to make art and show it. So for me, I kind of learned how to kind of control that beast, because really it's an inner voice that is taking on a physical form. Otherwise, we wouldn't pay no mind to the negative criticism. It wouldn't matter if we didn't think it was true.
You're speaking from the soul.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so understanding, okay, let's dig deeper into understanding why that is affecting me. And once you do that, you go, okay, that's just one aspect of it. And I'm choosing to focus on that one aspect as opposed to, the positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't try to change somebody's mind. So if there is negative criticism, you can't allow that to take up too much mental space, because you'll be trying to prove them wrong.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's just futile.
It's like all of the negativism of the last year or more than a year that we've had to go.
Sometimes it's better to just leave it behind
It is. It
and
is.
say, okay, well, that's one aspect.
Mhm. You state that you would like to articulate new nooks on your journey. So what's on the horizon? What's in the future?
Well, I've got this new studio space, which you can kind of see behind me.
That's big.
Um,
Nice.
it's big, yeah. And so my goal is, I guess, on the horizon is to just continue to evolve this practice uh, on a larger scale. And I don't mean that necessarily bigger pieces, because I've actually
Right.
been making smaller pieces since I've got such a large space. But it's thinking of the practice as a whole, and documenting it, going from drawing to works on paper to medium-sized canvases to large-scale canvases to murals, all of it, and thinking of it as a full practice and as a full body of work, as opposed to, directions here and there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you, speaking of sketches, do you sell your sketches?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I put them up on my site.
Do you have any advice for a younger self?
For a younger self, that's a good question. I guess are we thinking for a younger me or just a younger artist?
Either or.
I would say for a younger artist, just don't stop, because I'm sure you've known artists that were really, really, really good, and eventually they stop. Life has a way of getting you to stop doing things that maybe are not practical. But once you stop doing something, then it's over. As long as you're still making art and understanding why you're making it, it sounds cliche-ish, but you've got to first make it for yourself. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Surfing the internet for inspiration is just copying what other people have already done.
Yeah, you actually want to stay away from the from the internet. Stay away from Instagram, because
It's a trap.
you can get caught up in comparing yourself to other artists, and why I can't do that, and then you want to try it, and then it doesn't work out. It's a big failure.
Yeah.
So,
But on the other hand, if there are artists that you admire, it's
mhm.
absolutely okay to completely copy their work, because in doing so, and this is with anything, this is, musicians, when they start learning music, when they start playing music, they learn songs. They learn other songs to play, and they start playing it. But we feel like in visual art, or particularly in painting, that copying is somehow a negative. I think as long as it isn't the end point, if it's a part of the journey within a young artist's path, that's fine.
Sure.
Find the people who you find inspiring and start to emulate that.
Mhm.
Because within that, it's very difficult to recreate another artist's work perfectly. But within doing that, you start to find your own voice. And
Yeah.
then you kind of start to shed. It's almost like, remember those old images of the space shuttle going up? Eventually, the big rocket boosters start to fall off, and then you're up there in orbit. So it's okay. It's okay to use, artists that have come before you, or even who are currently, making art, to use them as a vehicle for inspiration.
Mhm.
Because it's a big myth that people think that artists just created it. They just made this piece out of nothing. People study, people train, people have mentors, people have teachers. It's all okay.
But everybody thinks that artists have to wait for inspiration,
Yeah,
which your inspiration comes from doing.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to. You can't wait for it. You have to make it appear. You have to conjure the
Yeah,
inspiration.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people might stop, because they don't feel inspired.
Yes, yes. Always hate the question when somebody says, "Well, do you have a muse?" Uh, where does your inspiration come from? And all those kinds of questions. I don't like those.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's an open one. It's like saying, you can ask it to anybody, what gives you joy in life?
yeah, no,
And that could be anything.
yeah,
Yeah.
probably the same thing that everybody else has joy about. So
Yeah. But for people like you and I, what makes us kind of lock ourselves in a room away from society to make something that, you know, we just feel the urge to make.
Yeah. 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 Well, we've been on here close to an hour. I just have a couple more questions, and one's kind of a fun one. What is the funniest thing that has happened to you lately?
The funniest thing, gosh, that's a good question. I don't know what's been funny. What have I laughed out loud about? I have a 2-year-old son,
Uh-huh.
and my gosh, at any part of the day, he can do something that is either completely ridiculous or completely adorable. That'll get me laughing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to see some of the comedians that come up on Facebook. Uh, they're actually kind of like reels, short
Okay. Yeah.
short clips, and
Yeah.
most of the ones I really like are British comedians. So
Like, who in particular?
Jerry Carr,
Okay.
I like Drew Lynch, but he's not a comedian, but he's self-deprecating because he has a stutter. But
Okay.
there's those two of them, and I
Jerry
like
Carr, I've heard of.
yeah Jimmy Carr, and I like Sarah Millican.
Okay.
They're all funny. So anyway, that keeps me laughing. But a child, I understand that as well. That's fun. Now you only have one child?
I have two. So I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son.
Wow, big difference there.
Yeah, it keeps me busy.
There you go. Not that you need anything else other than your art to keep you busy.
This is true. That's a fact.
So, is there anything else that you would like to add before we close?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for taking the time and allowing me to talk about my work. I have nothing but gratitude for this experience.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking your time to be a part of it as well. So, and of course, I wish you the best, and I hope someday that I'll be able to perhaps collect one of your pieces.
I would love that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that would that would be awesome because I really do like your work. So anyway, I wish you the best and you have a good day. And
Great. Thanks, Jerry. You too.
yeah, thank you.